Go on, make yourself comfortable, David.
Cool. Oh, take the weight off. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. That's better.
Hey.
It's the moment of freedom from deciding to wear the high heels. You've done well to go for trainers.
Yeah, the sensible shoes.
Yeah. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. So we've got a very interesting chat ahead. I'm joined by David Walmsley, the Chief Digital and Technology Officer for Pandora, to talk about your role, really.
Oh, God,
in a rapidly changing technological landscape.
Okay, we could do that.
You can do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool, sounds good. So I just want to get a sense of who's in the room to join us for this conversation. So anyone fulfilling a CTO or a CDO or a related role?
There you go.
I love that straight away, a woman at the front. Yes. A couple more. All right, who here wants to learn more about culture and how you yeah, we go. Okay, all right, we've got the culture questions at the ready.
Vultures.
Before we get into it, are you happy to just do an introduction, David, to yourself, your background, and how you ended up at Pandora?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is I'm not a technologist, so I'm kind of like been on a bit of a circular journey. I built my first website 29 years ago. I had to be in the right place at the right time in academic publishing back in the 1990s. I spent most of my career in retail, scaling the digital parts of traditional retailers, traditional consumer brands. And joined Pandora to do exactly that 4.5 years ago. We did a pretty good job on that. My boss said, you do things a bit differently in digital. And could you maybe do the same thing by taking IT and digital and data analytics? Can we crunch it all together? So that's the journey we've been on for the past 2.5 years. And it's just, hopefully tell you a bit more about what we're up to. But I think it's really critical that my background's commercial. I like to sell nice things to nice people. That's what I get a kick out of doing. And we just apply technology to that problem and opportunity. And that's kind of how we see the whole technology function at Pandora. And that's kind of why we're here for today and yesterday.
Yeah, perfect. So as the self-proclaimed commercial guy, on a more personal level, what was it that drew you to head over to the digital and the technological side of things?
It's I've always just followed my curiosity, to be honest. It's something I encourage in my team directly is just be curious, be interested in what you're doing and be interested in how you can apply it to business problems. So we, I think a lot of IT functions live and exist for, building big platforms and building big change. We exist, our number one objective for technology globally in Pandora is to sell more jewelry. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I like selling nice things to nice people. So I think that's really important. I think a lot of the digital space, speaking as a middle-aged bloke myself, is full of men who don't like shopping. Yeah. So a lot of e-commerce is full of like men who say things like, "We've got to take the pain out of shopping." And I'm sitting there thinking, I quite like shopping. So actually celebrating that and actually creating rich experiences for our customers just doing that piece really. So I think e-commerce has been, although it's commercial, it can be, I think the techies can take over in that space and they see it as kind of like something that's, shopping is something that needs to be kind of made frictionless and so on. It's like, I quite like a bit of friction in my shopping experience. So I think that's very important in terms of how we treat it. Culturally, that's where we are. So yeah, I like technology, but I like what technology can do for our shopping experience in particular.
Yeah. So how long ago since you started at Pandora?
4.5 years ago.
Okay, so you started before that big global pandemic thing that happened.
Yeah.
How did that affect everything that you'd started building, moving to more, on the e-commerce side and the impact on culture, particularly with a remote team?
Yeah, okay, two really good questions. I think, in terms of when COVID hit, thank goodness we'd actually got through the lion's share of the initial wave of transformation around the digital piece itself, so the website, the warehousing, the customer service piece we'd rebuilt from being black box into something we owned. And thank goodness we'd done that when COVID hit, because at one point, April, May that year, we were 97% pure play. So what that meant culturally was really interesting, though. So if you're our Italian general manager, he had 6% of his business was online when COVID hit. And so e-commerce was the 3 guys in the corner of his office, the 3 very good junior people he had doing that. But for him, it's a store business. But then he suddenly found himself being the boss of a pure play. So he was kind of like, he was on a very rapid boot camp, and he's ringing me up saying, can we, I want to do this thing on WhatsApp, and we're going to do this thing, and so he culturally changed overnight, as did so many people in our retail business around the world. So then we're on a kind of like a keep up, because actually, if you're in the digital space in a traditional organization, you're like, oh, you spend your life, oh, I wish everyone understood what we did. And in the middle of COVID, it's like, everyone understood what you did, and everyone wanted to do what you were doing. Like, whoa, hang on a minute, it's my special thing, you know? So you have this kind of cultural moment where we had to adapt, we had to trade the business, number one. We had to keep our people safe as a massive part of that. But then the cultural change was us, as digital people, engaging with the rest of the business, saying, okay, let's engage on how we change. We put in place a lot of small projects that made a huge difference to the in-store experience at the end of that year. Was it 2020, 21?
Yeah.
2020. And that cultural change has been so critical, I think, to Pandora's success in the last few years. The really significant growth we've had in the last few years has come from that kind of mindset shift that we've had.
Yeah. So I want you to travel back in time to that period. We won't try and relive all parts of it. But, thinking about pushing a cultural shift or making that transition for anyone that is looking to tackle cultural change, what were kind of the first little steps that you took? And not everyone is going to be doing this in a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
But any advice you could pass on?
I think that one of the key pieces is actually understand yourself first.
Yeah.
So like I said, we've had it very recently, actually, with our excellent VP of Data and Analytics. His whole thing has been pushing data science and predictive analytics for a number of years. And he's going through the same thing now, because it's like, oh, when will people understand the power of AI? And then everyone's understanding the power of AI. And it's like, whoa, hang on. So I think understand yourself first, because actually, your own neuroses and your own ego is part of that. And that's very important. So you've got to, don't always win on that front. But, it's very important to understand what motivates you, and why you think, what's your special contribution. And then within the organization, it's, Stephen Covey once said, start with the end in mind. So what do we want to achieve? What kind of culture do we want? And for us at Pandora, it's about, daring and dreaming. It's about kind of like thinking big about where we can be. And it's then just putting the tech and the digital piece within that context. Like I said, I inherited a tech function, an IT function, which would use phrases like, well, we need to go and see what the business wants. And it was well-intentioned. On day one, I banned the phrase, the business. I said, well, we are the business, we're here to sell jewelry. So I think that kind of breaking down the silos, breaking down the kind of like siloed mentality from technology, and then understanding what all your stakeholders, what they're interested in, and what they're trying to achieve. So the 5 whys are super important to us, super important. I was in China last week actually talking to the China commercial team in terms of, I'm expecting my team to ask you why. When you ask, well, we must have this. Well, why is that important to you? Must is quite a strong word.
Yeah.
So why is that important to you? And so that cultural shift that I think we achieved in Copenhagen a couple of years ago, we're trying to imbue into other parts of the organization now. And I think I talk a lot about robust collaboration as well. 2.5 years ago, we stopped being a tech function that would take down your order, like in a restaurant. And what would you like next? To a world where we said, well, hang on a minute, that sounds great, but why is that important to you? And actually then building into their fun things like tech debt, getting rid of legacy, investing in that. So the answer to what technology will we build next is a combination of what our stakeholders are asking for and also what we think is the right answer. And that's the robust collaboration. A lot of corporates suffer from that kind of order-taking IT mentality, because also it means that you're not to blame if it's a really bad idea, because you're just doing what the business asks you to do.
Yeah.
Life's too short for that. Life's too short. So we want to get on with stuff. We want to build the right technology. And that's kind of like really central to the culture change as well.
So alongside the removing the phrase, what the business wants, talk to the business.
Yeah.
Were there any other new ways of working or practices that you brought in place to help people through that transition as well?
Yeah, I mean, hugely. I mean, we inherited a world which was very well organized, but actually the tech functions quite a lot of the time, when it wasn't working well, we're kind of sitting in judgment on each other. So there's lots of change advisory boards and lots of governance, most of which seem to be set up to stop things from happening. it's regulatory or it's ITIL or whatever. So we kind of had a bit of a year zero on that. We scrapped a hell of a lot of governance in the first few weeks when we started. Let's just not do that. Yeah. And what we started to build up in its place was organic and right size for what we're trying to do. So with any kind of governance, like we built a my world's divided into vertical domains, supply chain tech, MarTech, digital, and so on. So the big verticals, and then the cross-cutting pieces, we've got very strict thought process about, okay, what's the minimum we can get away with in terms of the cross-cutters? So delivery management is a classic example. You need it. We're never going to go down the safe route. If you know about kind of safe, agile, and so on, it's just like, it's there to make CFOs feel comfortable with the world. It's like, no, we're not doing that. So, with that kind of how much governance we put in place is a really quite important cultural point. Do you want to keep it to an absolute minimum whilst not screwing up? So financial controls, and the proof's in the pudding. We're delivering 20 times more than was being delivered a few years ago. And actually now our biggest challenge is our business stakeholders have gone from not really asking for very much because they didn't think it would happen, to kind of like, that's gone completely the other way now. So we're going, whoa, hang on a minute. So we're just trying to sort of put some governance around that piece now. So yeah, all good.
I'm going to turn my attention to these guys for a second. We're obviously talking about quite a large business. I mean, Pandora's how many people are you total?
Oh, 24,000? 32. Oh God, it's gone. Yeah, I've got my.
Thank you for correcting. Good, got the notes. Size of companies in the room. Who here? Startup. Yeah, startup. Anyone describe themselves as bigger than a startup?
Yeah, a mixture.
So I'm asking that question because obviously you went into a larger corporate environment and then did restructuring and changing things. Lessons learned at that level that you could possibly pass down to smaller businesses? Yeah,
look, I mean, first of all, to say I'd probably be terrible in a small business. I know myself very well. I actually operate quite well in big corporates because it's a different thing.
Yeah.
But I think the cultural piece, even if there's 6 of you around one table, I think it's all human beings. The tech's the easy bit. It's the people are the tricky thing. So I think even if there's 6 of you around the table, you still got egos at play. You've got micro incentives at play. In corporates, they always talk about the politics, and people say, I hate politics. It's like, well, okay, then you're not human, because all politics is kind of like my incentives versus your incentives, my goals versus your goals, and them not being quite aligned. And that can happen in a company of 30,000 people, or it can happen in a world with 6 people around a table. And you're kidding yourself if you think that's not true. So I think that's the main lesson, is just that listen, start off with the end in mind. Really just keep probing on what the why questions all the time can work with in a two-way conversation as well as these big corporate conversations. And just that seek to understand all the time is fundamental. And then, we all deal with scarce resources. That's the other part of this. In a startup, it feels very real because it's kind of like you got one bank account and you're burning down that pot of money and hoping you're going to get your first 5 users, 10 users, 100 users. It's a very similar thing in a corporate environment. If you ask any of my team, they'd say like, oh, you're always cutting our budgets and how monstrous I am for doing it. But it's actually, we're investing at an elevated level for a consumer company of our size, So we're significantly investing over the last 2 years, and we're going to continue for the next few years at an elevated level. But we've always got constrained resource. We can never do everything we want to do. And Pandora, we kind of probably take on too much. We try 10 things, and we may get 8 of them right, but it's probably 4 more than our competition. But the same's true in a startup. You're always going to have constrained resources. So having some common language for making choices. And for us, it's about outcome. For my boss, Alexander, when he asked me to take on this role, he said, you focus on the outcomes, don't you, in e-commerce? I said, yeah, but could we do that on the bigger scale? Rather than say we're going to build this big system as the outcome, it's like, well, what's the system doing? Well, it's driving shelf edge availability. Okay, that's a good outcome. So that outcome focus you can apply to a startup just as a scale up as a corporate. And that'd be something I'd take away.
Yeah. So you're talking there about that outcome focus, and obviously we've touched on culture. One thing we've not dived into yet is values.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get your take, again, going into a company that already existed and trying to shake things up in the positive sense. How did values come into play?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're still quite a young, big business. So, the business was founded 40 years ago. here in Copenhagen. Winnie and Per, our founders, little jewelry shop. But really, the explosive growth that the business had over the 15 years, it's only 8 years ago that they decided to kind of start the rolling together, because it's a very franchise-based business around the world. So we've only really been like a global business, as in the sense of like a single big business, for about 8 years. So we're still quite young. I'm a member of the management board. There's 6 of us, 7 of us on the management board. We're quite a small leadership team. We're very close, and that helps enormously. So we're still quite a small business. But the values are really important to us, And I actually mentioned 2 of them before, dreaming and daring. Our other 2 are delivering and caring. And they fit together. We have a massive focus on thinking big, dreaming about where we're going to go next. We have a massive focus on getting stuff done. One of my favorite phrases is, we prove by doing. Like, we're just going to get on with it, and we're going to prove we're going to stop arguing about stuff. We're just going to get on with it. So that delivery piece is really fundamental.
Yep.
The daring piece, in terms of putting ourselves in harm's way, is also very important. Life's too short, Life is mostly absurd. I don't know if you know that, but, breaking news. So we don't take ourselves too seriously. We put ourselves in harm's way. We take risks. We take personal risks when we think that something is worth fighting for and getting done well. And the last piece then is the caring piece, which is super important to me personally. Like I said, life is mostly absurd. Some terrible things will happen in your life. Some really great things will happen in your life. And in between, you go to work. And work gives you purpose, gives you meaning, gives you reward, and so on. But, we've got to take care of each other. And that's really important. I don't want to come across like some hippie, but it's kind of like really important to me on a personal level. And hopefully I take care of my team around me, my immediate team. And I just encourage all my kind of people leaders to do the same. And actually, putting our money where our mouth is, we've got about 550 people in global technology in Pandora, of whom about 85 are people leaders.
Okay.
And we come together as a people leader community where, when we're in the room, we're all the same. Because being a people leader doesn't change whichever level you're at. So treating that as kind of like one community is very important. There's no hierarchy when we come together as the people leader community.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. And with those values, have they been molded or reshaped by different teams across the organization? You hear about this sometimes, the tech team taking the company values and altering them so that they work a little bit better for the tech team.
Okay, so yeah. So when we first came in, I brought a couple of folks with me 4.5 years ago, and we were the digital guys, and we're doing our own thing, and mostly trying to avoid getting too engaged with IT and so on, doing our own thing. And I inherited a tech team in Baltimore, and it's just the wrong location, super people. So we shut that team down. We're spinning up a team in Copenhagen. We rented a floor off Alamedia on the waterfront and built this digital hub. And at the time, there were some good company values in place, but they maybe lost their shine a little bit, and they weren't so relevant for us. And we wanted to hire people based on attitude and culture, so we defined our own culture, which is around crafting, creativity, collaboration. You get the C's mentality.
Yeah.
And then we painted it on the walls and it was literally painted on the walls in the office. We didn't win too many friends with facilities management, but we really just defined our own culture. But then about 2.5 years ago, as a leadership team, we wanted to put in place values that actually meant something to the current business.
Okay.
And for us and on the exec leadership team, it was important that the values were really just a version of us when we're at our best. Not if you ever worked in a corporate, it's almost like, I won't use the word, but B-shit bingo sometimes, in terms of entrepreneurial and I defy most people to name their values in their corporate environment, unless they're etched in the lifts. They're usually kind of on some kind of plaque. But we live our values. We really live our values, and some of the guys that are here today, they'll swear by it as well. We talk about it all the time, and we reference people in terms of in terms of feedback. What you did there was really daring. What you did, I love the caring that you brought to that, and it's very important. It's part of the DNA. It's part of the language we use every day, and it's not just on your annual appraisal.
Yeah.
It's kind of like part of the DNA for the business, and it kind of makes it more interesting because we've got some common language there.
Yeah.
So.
How has that changed your hiring process?
Again, if you ask my boss, he'll say he hires for attitude every time. So I don't know quite well. He inherited me, but it's fine. But the attitude piece is important because you can't fake that.
Okay.
And so you can learn functional knowledge. 2.5 years ago, I didn't know what an ERP was. So I could do you some diagrams if anyone's interested in ERP. Don't. But it's just functional knowledge. And I think a lot of people in kind of corporate tech land treat it with a lot of mystique. And it's like, it's just stuff to learn. But what you can't fake is the attitude piece, which is get stuff done, care about people, all of that piece. So we hire for attitude first and foremost because we can teach people specific skill sets. But I think that's really important for us, is that kind of hiring for attitude.
Yeah. But I'm going to push you on that one a little bit.
Yeah.
So hiring for attitude, anyone growing a business, I've recently gone through a bunch of hiring myself.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know if this will work outside of the UK, you'll get it, but it's Marmite, it's love-hate.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes it's great fun and sometimes I absolutely loathe it. And I'm still trying to work on how I improve my own process and what I'm specifically looking for.
Yeah.
So with attitude in particular, is there anything that you've brought into the hiring process to try and figure out what that attitude of that individual is?
It's a really good question. We designed our own hiring process. So my HR hero is a guy called Laszlo Bock, who was the HR leader in Google for the first 15 years of the business. And he wrote a playbook. If you look it up, Bock is I can't remember if it's B-L-O-C-H or B-O-C-H, can't remember. Anyway, Laszlo is his first name. And the playbook is all in there. And it's we replicated a lot of that in our hiring process. So, and we treated the hiring process like a product, like a digital product. So we have sprints around it. We're designing the process, constantly reviewing the process to try and tune it. So you do the coffee chats, you do the filters to pieces, we do a functional interview, then we do a cultural interview. And one of Laszlo's main points was the person who's doing the person who needs to fill the role is usually the worst person to make the final decision, because they've got the burning platform. They need to fill the hole. They've got a team of 5 people. They've got a slot. They need to fill the slot. So they're the most incentivized person to settle. They're good enough. Goodness sake, let's just get them hired. So our process, we try to stop each other from doing that. So it's a panel-based, well, it's not panel-based interview, but the review process is panel-based. So the culture interview is a cross-check. We do grandparents interviews as well where they're relevant, and we do case studies. Because one of the things you find in corporates is this kind of like lack of case studies, which you have in a lot of consultancies or tech companies. And so we have functional case studies that, whether it's coding or code review or debugging, or whether it's product management or it's an analytic question or whatever. Because do you know what? Corporates can sometimes hire people who literally can't do the job and they are just winging it. So just try and crunch that piece down. But the point was treating the hiring process like a product. Yeah. We treat the space in the digital hub like a product as well. Our office space, so we're constantly reviewing that and thinking about how we can iterate it. And I just encourage you, again, regardless of the size of your company, your hiring process is absolutely one of your strategic points of advantage. And the last thing I'd say on hiring is that if I ask everyone in this room, hands up, I won't do it, but if I ask you hands up if you think you're an above average interviewer, most people in this room, yeah, there you go. Thank you, sir. Most people will put their hands up because, of course, we all think we're above average drivers. We all think we're above, and everyone thinks they're above average interviewers, which it just can't be true. So actually, how do you, in a corporate environment, how do you tease out who are your best interviewers? And that's something also we try to look at as well for the cultural people who do the cultural interviews, the cross-check interviews. And I always lean on a couple of people specifically because I know they're good for me because they tell me when I'm an idiot, but they're also very good cultural readers as well. So
yeah. I think I'm below average height. I know that one, particularly in Denmark.
Yes, yeah, very tall.
Way below the line of a mirror in the ladies' bathroom. Just as a pre-warning, you're going to be able to ask questions. So if you do have a question for David, please go to a QR code, which will pop up on the screen soon. Did I get that right? Yeah, we go. Perfect. As if by magic, that was going to work.
There we go.
If you have a question, please scan the QR code and get it up for us. While we wait for a few questions to come through, let's talk technology just for a second.
Okay.
I'll throw the commercial guy into technology language. I'm just curious, with Pandora, thinking ahead for the future and how much you've changed over the last few years.
Yeah.
What areas of technology right now are a focus or particularly exciting for you?
Well, I'm going to answer a slightly different question than I'll answer your question. Because the way what we build and what we change is obviously important. And again, in typical corporate environments, it's systems are built by third parties. They're disparate. We must have a merchandise system. We must have a warehouse system. And the most knowledge in the business is accrued on the day the system goes live. And then the third party leaves. and it's thrown at a TCS or an Accenture to support. Open the manual, congratulations, you've inherited a new system you know nothing about. So one of the things we put in place was creating sustainable technology teams and putting people onto the payroll. So 2.5 years ago, we had one person in the business, a great guy called Fong in Australia, who knew anything about our supply chain systems. One person on the payroll, and we've now got a growing squad of about 35, 38 people, permanents on the payroll. We still use third parties. We still use the Accentures and Sapiens of the world. So how we build technology is really important. And then the technology itself, not just about systems, but about integration. So most corporates are built with tons and tons of horrible hardwired spaghetti connections, plugging all these disparate systems together. And on day one, we started the process of stripping that out and replacing it with an event streaming approach and an API-driven approach to rebuild the dark matter, rebuild the glue that holds the systems together. And you see one of our proponents in the audience from our team, so Gudrun. So it's just, that's super important, how the systems hang together, because that's the big unlock. And there's a great clip on LinkedIn of the Ford CEO talking about this, how the software in their cars comes from 200 different companies and none of it talks together. When he's asked why a Tesla's so much better than you, he said, well, fundamentally, how we build software. So how we build the technology is the fundamental piece to I think, the unlock that we've got. And then you were asking, sorry.
What's exciting?
What's exciting?
What's coming next?
Well, goodness me, AI, No, so I think I got to say, I think things like the integration approach we're taking is actually exciting. That's the cutting edge piece. I think, look, now we've built so much of the tech stack out, we've got lights on across our tech ecosystems, it does come down to the tunes we can play with that. Now we've built the systems, and the tunes are predictive analytics, simple things like buying silver better. We make all our own jewelry in Thailand, 14,000 amazing people making it. The one thing you don't want to run out of in our business is silver. So guess what happens? We probably buy a little bit too much than we maybe need to because you want to keep it rolling. So building predictive models for things like that, simple use cases where we can really unlock the power of the business and streamline the business. Yeah. The front end, our customer segmentation's all like self-learning segments driven by an ML machine learning engine. So we've got discrete pieces of AI around the organization, and like a lot of organizations now, we're trying to get our heads around what Gen AI means to us, and in all the different layers, from the customer layer through to the back end, how we build software is a huge unlock for us as well.
Lots of exciting stuff ahead. I'm looking forward to your generative AI as well, just so I can try on certain earrings without going in store. Right, we've got a bunch of questions coming through, so let's see how many of these we can whiz through. I am going to pull one up from Anonymous, because actually this one's very, I think, hopefully quick, but good thoughts on hiring. Thanks, Anonymous. Can you speak on firing for cultural change?
Ooh, crikey.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a part of it, because I think, what do I think? I think we're a big enough organization that if you've got the right attitude, you might be in the wrong slot. So we look to move people around quite often. And I think it's very important with the kind of continuous feedback culture that we try to build. When we're at our best, we give continuous feedback to each other. And a big part of that can sometimes be like you're possibly not in the right slot. Mm-hmm. So trying to move people around. But if people don't have the right attitude, and I mean, my particular bugbear is people who think their job is to give opinions. It's like, you're in the wrong place. So I think sometimes we do have to exit people, and it's never a nice thing to have to do on the day. But actually what you can find quite often is that when that person has left, you get someone coming to you in the corridor and say like, oh, you were paying attention. Because that person was maybe having an effect on the people around them and the culture around them. So it's never a nice thing to do. It's always the last resort. You try to make it work. But actually, when you do actually rip off the Band-Aid, the business gets better, the culture gets better as a result of that. Yeah. But it's definitely the flip side, but it's definitely the last resort.
Yeah. Good answer. Right, from Brian, what is the worst advice you would like us to avoid listening to from anyone, regardless of their title or name?
God. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I've had some rubbish advice. Thank you. I've had some rubbish advice over the years, I've got to say. So my favorite was the guy who told me, senior guy 20 years ago, said, David, and my voice is lowered now probably, but said, you need to lower your voice, and to have more gravitas, don't tell so many jokes. And now, last time I saw him as a salesman on a train station, I met him and he's very miserable. I mean, people give you terrible advice along the way, and the key is to be able to filter it, in terms of, okay, thank you very much, but thank you for your inputs, but I'm going to move on now. And I think it's very important to spot. Find your own mentors, find your own kind of people you find interesting and you can learn something from. So it's usually not the man or woman 2 or 3 stages above you. It can be, but you can find mentors in all kinds of places. And a mentor is usually someone who's going to challenge you rather than tell you. So hey, what are you thinking about this? What's your approach to this? I think getting someone who can challenge you and question you a lot, they're going to be the better mentors than the people that are like, what you need to do is, because it's usually terrible advice when they do that. So.
Great. I can't tell if the timer's disappeared and we've run out of time, or if we've got one more question.
We must have one more. We must have one.
Let's do one more. So I'll let you pick. You can see the questions as well.
Oh, God. Lowering. What is the role of change managers in the digitalization era? Are they focused more on the technical or cultural? Really good question, actually. For me, change management is actually quite a narrow band. We have a small change management function in our tech world, and they're very focused on the soup and nuts, the real basic stuff. So we just rolled out warehouse management system. They're the guys on the ground in the warehouse doing the training, doing the super user training, and so on. And so for me, change management is actually a very tightly bound set of functions. But if you're talking about change culture overall, then everyone is a change agent, and that comes down to the culture. So again, I talk about the kind of like people in technology or digital, almost like not wanting to engage. Well, it's our special thing. That's something I look out for. People with that sense of specialness. It's like, no, you're actually there to explain. Your mission is to explain. Your mission is to engage. So we're all change agents. So I'm very specific. The question said change manager. Change manager for me means that functional set of tasks. Change agents and change agency is something we all need to do.
Awesome. Well, are you happy to hang out by the side of the stage just for a couple of minutes for anyone who wants to get one of these questions answered?
Let's do that.
Can you all join me in a round of applause for David? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, guys.